Hey guys, Sam here with another art video. Long time no see. Today I've got a process video for the gouache art I did for the cover page for the month of March in my planner. I really want to talk about my inspiration and the medium choices I made for this one, so let's get started. The theme for March in my planner was heavily influenced by that Scandinavian Nordic design that uses simple shapes to render beautiful graphic design depictions of nature. I really love the style and have for a while now, and decided that March was a good month to feature washi tapes and stickers that I have that fit that style. I thought it was also a good month to make some art in that style. When picking a character to use for this art, I settled on one of mine that best exemplifies the Scandinavian Nordic design style. Her name is Lisa, and she's a very graceful, refined woman who keeps chickens and bees and gardens and is just the very definition of all that style is all about. So, to start off, I drew her with some lavender. Then I got to work on the background. When I was first doing the sketch, I sketched in some really loose, really rough, really ugly florals, and I didn't like how they looked at all. The fact of the matter is I'm really bad at florals. So as I was working on resizing the thumbnail and tracing it off onto a new sheet of paper, I was trying to decide what I could put into the background. At first I was going to look and see about how other people, namely Rifle Paper Company and Brittany Lee, handle florals in their work and try to replicate some florals in that same sort of style. But then I remembered the queen of the style I was going for, the person who inspired both Rifle Paper Company and Brittany Lee, Mary Blair. You could say that Mary Blair had a flair for shape and color, and she used both to render beautifully whimsical art, so I decided to look at some of what she did, and while looking I found a picture that I've seen before and often admired of some chickens pecking around in a farmyard, and that was when I decided that instead of florals, I was definitely going to be putting some chickens in instead. I keep chickens myself, and I love their quirky personalities and how well they lend themselves to art. You can put them in the background of almost anything, doing almost anything, and they just look like they belong there. So I set about reimagining the background of this art with chickens instead of florals. Once that was squared away, I had to decide on a medium. I was originally going to do it with colored pencils in a very textured sort of way, but the more I looked at Mary Blair's art, the more I decided I needed to do it in gouache. I've had a notoriously bad track record with gouache, partly because I don't own a lot of gouache. In fact, the only full color range set I own is a very cheap, very bad set that dries more like acrylic and barely re-wets. Not at all good for your first foray into gouache. The other reason I don't own much gouache is because I was looking to get better at watercolor and acrylic before I invested in gouache, as I felt like gouache was somewhere between the two. But then one day I watched a video where an artist here on YouTube was using white gouache with a pan of watercolors, and everything clicked. Watercolor could provide the pigment, and the white gouache could provide the right paint consistency. So I bought a large, high-quality tube of white gouache from Holbein and set about mixing it with my cheaper watercolors to see if I could get the nice look of gouache. But while the cobbled-together gouache worked in theory, I found that my paintings weren't turning out how I thought they should, and so I put my gouache aside for a while, more from life getting in the way and less from actual frustration with the medium. So when I decided to do this art with gouache instead of colored pencil, I was a little worried. What if it turned out badly? Well, I reasoned I still had the sketch and could do a colored pencil or marker art instead, so I just went for it. In the time that I had last used gouache, I had been watching videos of artists who work primarily in gouache, using gouache, and had picked up some tips. Namely that there are different levels of water you can mix to your paint to achieve different effects, and that the buttery consistency is really the best way to work with it. I realized I had always been mixing too much water. I'd always been trying to use them too much like watercolor. In retrospect, I don't really know how I managed to paint this painting. It truly felt like someone else more skilled than me possessed my body and did it. I mixed colors intuitively and without fear. I added just the right amounts of water. I painted on most of the tiny details instead of trying to draw them in later. I really have no idea how I did half of what I did, but I couldn't be more pleased with the result. And I truly believe that watching others with more skill with gouache is the reason behind my ability to create this with even just a bit more confidence. And believing in yourself while working is at least half the battle toward good art. So, my tip for you today is to buy a tube of white gouache and mix it with your watercolors instead of buying individual tubes of color, especially if you're just starting out. I personally mix my Holbein permanent white gouache with Dr. P.H. Martin's liquid watercolors because I like the resulting mixture of the already liquid watercolors with the gouache. They required very little water to get a good consistency. For some colors though, I used my cheaper sets of Jane Davenport and Prima watercolors to mix in additional tones. The cheaper watercolors work best for mixing with gouache because the binder is what makes them chalky and cheap. But when inside a matte paint like gouache, that chalkiness is less of a detracting factor. On top of that, the Jane Davenport paints are dye-based and are more vibrant, similar to the P.H. Martin's paints, which helps counter the dulling the white paint does. And the only real concern with the Jane Davenport paints are that because they are dye-based, they are not light-fast. So I don't know how they will react with the gouache over time, but since it's in my planner, I'm less worried about it. Another thing I found was that some colors benefited from being left to dry. I painted this over the course of 2 days, and some of the yellows and browns that dried down overnight were much more vibrant the next day. Anyway, that's about all I have to say about the piece. Overall, I'm super pleased with the result, and I hope that, much like I learned a lot by watching other artists use gouache, that hopefully you learned something here today too. One of my main reasons with having this channel and my blog are to connect with others and help them learn something that they don't know, or, at the very least, inspire them in their own art endeavors. I like sharing the final product of my work, sure, but I honestly do most of what I do as a way to reach out and connect with others. That being said, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you'd like to see more videos like this, consider subscribing. And if you've got any questions or just want to talk, leave me a comment below. Until next time, stay curious.